I'm Makini Smith. After going through a divorce, my sister passing away, experiencing narcissistic abuse, and some significant health scares, I realized through sharing my story that I wasn't alone in my suffering. Suffering, subjective distress generated by the experience of being out of balance. In a deep dive to holistically heal mind, body, and soul is where I discovered peace, clarity, and connection. It is impossible to be truly wise without some real life hardship, and we cannot develop post-traumatic wisdom without making it through, and most importantly, through it together. Social connection builds resilience, and resilience helps create post-traumatic wisdom, and that wisdom leads to hope. Hope for you and others witnessing and participating in your healing, and hope for your community. A healthy community is a healing community, and a healing community is full of hope because it has seen its own people weather, survive, and thrive. Heather Elliott Whitehead is a serial entrepreneur with ventures in business solutions, retail, entertainment, and food manufacturing. She's the author of The Strength of Your Straw, The Secret to Overcoming Heartbreak and Hardships. With executive experience across different sectors globally, she's established Elliott PR Group in 2009 in New York City, representing African-American celebrities and entertainment firms, including the Fox hit Empire, Scandal on ABC, Blackish on ABC, and Lionsgate Entertainment. Heather is involved in philanthropy through Empower Canada and Thrive Global Project, providing support to disadvantaged women and unhoused individuals in New York City. So please welcome to the show, Heather Elliott Whitehead.
Hi, Makini.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this chat. You know, I'm a little nervous. Nervous. You know, obviously, I'll be talking about my personal life in some way. And so obviously, that's always very nerve-wracking. But I must say, before we start, that I've been watching your trajectory as a podcaster and a coach leader, and I'm just in awe of your consistency, your strength, and your tenacity. I know your story, and I was there from the very beginning. And I'm really proud of you and what you're doing. I love the way you're using your platform as well to help other women share their voice, to help other women and men. And so I just want to say congratulations to you on everything. And I'm looking forward to today. I know it will be a blessing to a lot of people. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you.
Thank you so much, Heather. That does mean a lot to me. You know, I can't even remember what year it was, but you know, it's been a long time. I think probably back in 2013, 2014, I think was the first time I remember having a phone conversation with you.
Yeah.
And you know, like you said, it's been a long time, and I always appreciate people that have been around, and we get to watch each other grow and you know, lift each other up. And, you know, congrats to you on the new book and all the things that you're doing, because you've been doing phenomenal things over the years. So thank you. Thank you for what you do. And I truly, truly appreciate your time, your energy. And I am looking forward to, you know, getting to know you on a deeper level in today's conversation and sharing with the listeners, you know, the tools that are in your book as well.
Sure. Thank you. Looking forward.
So, okay, before we get to where you are presently, I love to go back a bit and get into the mind of young Heather. You know, society has a way of shaping our beliefs and shifting who we truly are. And, you know, as kids, we have these vivid imaginations of who we want to be and what we want to do before whether our family unintentionally, tells us to be realistic, or society. So I would love to know who little Heather wanted to be, or what little Heather wanted to be when she was a little girl.
So that's a really interesting question. It was not too long ago that I was really I found myself in, deep introspection, maybe a few months ago. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on.
Mm-hmm.
And during that process, I remember just literally sitting down on my bed. I think it was like one Sunday afternoon, just kind of going back, way, way back to my childhood in deep rural Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And my childhood was, I think, one of the happiest childhood any child would have. And I wish that my son could have that childhood. I grew up in a farming community in a place called Trelawney in Jamaica. And both my parents were farmers. And so it was commonplace for us to go to the farm after school. We had our own goats that we had to rear or raise, as they say. There were five of us in our family. And after our births, or I guess between birth and kindergarten, my dad gifted us a goat each. And it really was an investment. And we're talking about very early 70s. And
Mm-hmm.
it's an investment. And when we um, pass what we call the common entrance, or here it's like your test to get to high school, our parents would sell that goat and then use it towards their education. So it was an investment.
Wow.
And so we had the goat, yes, and we'd have to feed the goat, nurture the goat, and all that over the years. Take it to graze and every day, and do our chores and do whatever it takes to help that goat along. Right? That's true story. And I remember every time I used to go to the farm, I would think, I was happy we were young. We didn't really do the whole television thing. We were reading books, or we're playing like kids, in the stream and the river, just wherever we were, in the forest and the trees, whatever, we were just playing and being happy as kids. But I always wanted to get out of there. I always wanted to do something different. I was always this little girl with a really big view of the world. And I remember the first time we went to the capital, which is Kingston, Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And here we were driving in this huge, what we used to call a country bus,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a big school trip for the first time. We were going to Kingston. There were maybe 40 of us on the bus, parents and teachers and kids. And we went to a movie theater for the first time. And I remember, we went to see this Eddie Murphy movie, and I think it was called The Golden Child. So you could go all the way back there and see. And we
Mm-hmm.
were in the movie theater, but I remember driving from the country, and when we got to the city, I saw all these beautiful people. I saw these beautiful cars. I saw these beautiful houses. And my little mind just became so excited. And I'm like, oh, I don't ever want to go back. I don't want to go back to the country. I want to do great things. I want to conquer this city. And I remember we went into the movie theater and we came out, and I was just weeping in the bus because I didn't want to go back to the country. I wanted to stay because I knew that, I was bigger than that. And, I think I carried that right through my young teenage years, right through high school. And so said, so done, because immediately after I finished high school, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to Manitoba, Morden, Manitoba, in the prairies, no less. And I was the only girl of color in my class. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very rural town. You're from Canada, so you know what that is like. It's
Mm-hmm.
way out there in the prairies, about 3 hours from Winnipeg. And that was the closest city to where I was. And as a young Jamaican girl, in a very small town, a very, I guess, prairie town, my first sports was hockey.
Oh, wow.
And I know, I know, right? It's just wild. So from one spectrum to the other. And it was hockey. But Manitoba more than opened my eyes to greater things. And I've never looked back. I left from there. I came to the United States and I, did a course of study. And I've been doing, thank goodness, really well, I should say, ever since
Mm-hmm.
that time. But I think I was able to do all of that because young Heather never took her mind, her heart, her soul off what she wanted to accomplish. She wanted to be bigger than who she thought she was.
Mm-hmm.
And in some way, I carried that right through my adult life. Now, it never got trickier or complex until I became an adult. And then I wish I was a child again. Then life really happened. And I suspect that's why we're here because life happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
young Heather wanted to be bigger than she was. I don't know if I'm exactly where I wanted to be, but young Heather was a dream.
mm, mm. What did you learn about emotions growing up? Because I know, especially, coming from
Caribbean. Mm-hmm.
yes. I interviewed a woman from the Caribbean yesterday who was a psychotherapist, and we were talking about, as kids, what we didn't learn
Mm-hmm.
about emotions and mental health. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, what you learned about emotions growing up and how has it helped you or hurt you?
Okay. What an amazing question. I learned nothing. And the reason why I say that is because we didn't share openly in our household. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to handle my emotions. I want to tell you something that's probably going to shock a lot of people. The truth is, my mother, up to this day, my mother is very truly Jamaican. And I've been trying to pick her brain about her young life to
Mm-hmm.
see why she's the way she is. I know my mother loves us. I know my mother loves me. I like to say I'm my mother's favorite child, right? Believe me. And if you know what Caribbean parenting is like, their love language is taking care of their children, cooking food, cleaning, making sure
Mm-hmm.
they go to school well put together and all that. Well, my mother, up to this day, and I'm in my 50s proudly, has never given me a hug and say, I love you.
Oh, wow.
Never.
Wow.
I don't know what she's afraid of, but I know my mother loves me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So that's the extent of what I know about emotions. And I don't know if that has anything to do with my relationship over the years. But I do know that I am an extremely loving person. And
Mm-hmm.
I have so much love and I give so much love. And I think it's because of this why I end up getting hurt in the past all the time, or the people that I really care about, why they end up hurting me or letting me down.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've managed to somehow, have good control over my emotions in some way, despite what or how we grew up. Or mother or dad was a little bit, more open. He would give us these little loose hugs and good job. But my
Mm-hmm.
mother is very stoic and really nice, caring woman, just not loving.
Wow.
Now, I see what we probably should have experienced. I see that with my nieces and nephews, her grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
especially the younger ones. She tells them she loves them. She hugs them. She can't get enough of them. But I believe it has everything to do with the era and her story that we don't know anything about
Right. Right.
when they right. And so when she migrated to the United States many moons ago, I think she was sensitized to something different. But that time we were already grown and old. you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
But the grandkids, they were able to benefit from what she's learned
Mm-hmm.
after she came out of that environment. But we didn't have that. So the way, again, our parents showed us love was making sure that we were well fed, well taken care of. And I mean, we were some of the most um, well taken care of kids in our community, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and everybody knew that because my dad was a big deacon in the church and he was very, very well respected. And my mother was a deaconess and a choir leader and all of that good stuff. And, you know, we were very, very respected in the community. And everybody knew that we were very smart kids because, you know, of the amount of time and energy that our parents put into us. They ensured that we went to good school. They ensured that we, you know, continued with our education right through. But inside the home, you know, we weren't the typical TV type of family when it comes on to, you know, our parents showing us or being emotional around us.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned earlier about the therapist that I interviewed yesterday. We were talking about the Caribbean, the Black community, and things that we grew up with as our normal that were actually traumatic that we didn't know until we became adults. And
Absolutely.
it's like discovering now, you know, I proudly say I'm turning 44 next week, but like I over the last few years, you know, discovering things that I didn't know was, I guess, emotional neglect growing up because it's like you know that your parents love you, you feel they love you, but then when you look at the things that you didn't get as a child, you know, how that affects our relationships as adults and our interaction as adults, and now forcing us at this age to unlearn and relearn how to do things for the next generation, you know, for our children, for our grandchildren. So like I love the fact that you still felt loved and cared for. But then on the flip side, it's like it's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Like to know that you didn't get the
Nurturing.
the nurturing, the affection, and the words of affirmation from your mother. Like I feel like it's very interesting. I love to ask people like, whose love did you crave the most, mom or dad's?
I craved my grandmother.
Interesting.
She was the one so my mother was always the stricter one. My mother had a certain view of what we should be. My dad was a little bit more open and more you know, I guess kind. You know, he would just let us be. But my mother would not have it. And I suspect that I think my mother, and I think I try to not try, I think I'm guilty of doing that with my son. And so we've had a lot of issues over the years, him from a young teenager into young adulthood, because maybe I'm projecting what I want, you know, what I maybe right, who I am onto him, and that's not who he is. And I think my mother did the same thing to us. But I could always run away to my grandmother when I didn't want to deal with that. And my grandmother was this, come on, your arms wide open, come in, you know. And if you know anything about growing up in the Caribbean, you have that matriarch, you know, that very strong matriarch. And that's who our grandmother was. And so we, you know, I spoke very highly about her in the book. In fact, my book, The Strength of Your Straw, the name of it came from my grandmother. And so she was very, very important in my life. But I want to go back to what you were saying about things that you didn't know were probably traumatic or probably were neglect. And, you know, as you get older, we learn about these attachment theories. And a lot of that, you know, has to do with how we were brought up and how we were loved and how we were nurtured as adults. So what happens is that just sort of morphs into how we handle our present day relationships with our partners in particular.
Mm-hmm.
because, I had to learn, um, through the process of journaling and even just writing this book, what my attachment style was like. And I was kind of shocked to find out what it was. And a lot of that based on my own therapy and my own learning and teaching is that I was neglected emotionally as a child. And
Mm-hmm.
so the way in which I handle a breakup, for example, or handle disappointment in a relationship has everything to do with what I went through as a
Mm-hmm.
child. And
Mm-hmm.
we didn't know this
Yeah.
until we were grown adults. Um, so, but I feel that, based on what you said about growing up in the Caribbean environment, that we suffer from what I know, from what I've heard, from what I've seen, the Black community, particularly the folks who grew up like I did, suffer the most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting to know.
Yeah, you mentioned attachment styles. So for anyone who's listening that isn't aware, there's a book called Attached, and
Hmm.
we have different attachment styles. So there's secure, there's anxious, there's avoidant. You could be a mix of the two.
Fearful. Hmm.
Yeah, I believe I'm secure, anxious. um, but like you said, it lets you know your attachment style, but it's based on your childhood.
Hmm.
Your
Hmm.
caregiver, your parents, how they were with you as a child, when they left and returned and your responses and all those things. So it's as an adult, it was very interesting for me to read and then now understand my attachment
Right.
style.
Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely recommend that book.
No,
um,
I learned about it during a little while ago, but then as a coach, I'm a transition and self development coach. And in my teaching, in my learning, in my certification trainings and all that, I learned a lot about these things. And
mhm,
I have not read the book attached, but I will definitely go and look for it. But I
mhm,
remember during one session, one of our lecturers, I was sort of really in tune to what the professor was saying about, or the teacher, the thought leader was saying about attachment theory. And for me, by all accounts, I had a decent childhood, as I mentioned, with a
mhm,
strong, and I think I had a very strong, wholesome foundation in a stable home environment where
mhm,
both parents were present, because that's very, very important.
mhm,
And I thought, again, like I said, they were very vested in my development. And I can't recall any instance in my childhood that as an adult would have negatively, impacted the way I lived my life, other than, again, here I'm going to shock some people, the time that I was molested by a family friend. So when I
wow,
look back, I can only think about, in my mind, I had a perfect childhood regardless of the emotional deficit.
mhm,
But
mhm,
I never really assessed that until I became older. But I can't recall any instance where I felt unsafe, unloved, or, not
mhm,
nurtured in any way. Again, having to tell my parents in my 40s about what my dad's friend did to me was very heartbreaking for my father. And
mhm,
particularly, he wanted to do things that he had never thought about in his life. And I
mhm,
said, okay, I'm sorry to break your heart this way, but this person did that. But
mhm,
the truth is, it was difficult for me to determine what attachment style I identify with. Um, However, it was evident to me that the length of time I took to get over my heartbreak, which is the premise for the book,
mhm,
or the level of worry. I'm a worrier.
mhm.
I worry about everything. I worry myself into hypertension.
It's
So,
anxiety.
yes, correct. And the level of worry and rumination I endured after, this whole, I think, heartbreak, I believe maybe obviously is a result of what I term my emotional deficiencies, right?
Mhm,
And so I don't know what attachment style I I am or I belong to, because I experience almost all of the ones that they talk about.
Mm-hmm. In the book attached, there's a test. They have the test in there, so you can take it based
Oh,
on their
really?
scoring.
That's
I
interesting.
believe they're the ones that came up with it. I think, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So there's the test in there that you can take, so it lets you know which one you are,
Mm-hmm.
so you're not
Mm-hmm.
kind of guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, to what you said, I feel like because of the Caribbean, and you know what, it's not just the Caribbean culture, because it's a lot of cultures where the previous generations don't talk about what they've experienced. They don't really share deep, transparent stories of their
Right.
history. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their experiences are swept under the rug. There's a
Yes.
lot of things, a lot of different forms of abuse that are covered up. There's all these
Mm-hmm.
things that we experience as normal because culturally, that's just
Mm-hmm.
what we've done. But
Mm-hmm.
I love and appreciate people like yourself that are doing the work now, that
Mm-hmm.
are holding people accountable, that are speaking up, that are sharing your story. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it's not a knock to your parents, because you grew up,
No.
you felt loved, you grew up
Mm-hmm.
with both parents. But
Mm-hmm.
there are some things culturally where it's almost like they're dealing with their traumas in that moment, right?
Correct.
So whatever it was,
Absolutely correct.
yeah. So it's whatever it was that your mom experienced, maybe
Mm-hmm.
because she hadn't gone through her healing journey, the effects of that, maybe that's why she wasn't as affectionate or any of those things. Like, if I were to look back at even my parenting, all three of my kids have experienced a different version of me based on
Mm-hmm.
my healing journey and where I was in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. So it's
Mm-hmm.
never a knock to our parents. It's just our experience. It's,
Our
the effect
experience, yeah.
we went through. But
Absolutely.
you
And I
mentioned your
wish my
grandmother.
mother, yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
I just want to say, I wish my mom had the opportunity I have now to get therapy,
Mhm.
really dissect, her childhood and
Mhm.
embrace her traumas and all that. And sometimes, even today, I look at her and I'm like, boy, I really wish mommy was a little bit more open. I really wish she could just seek some type of therapy because I know she must be hurting.
Mhm.
Um, in the book, I talk about the tragedy, the heartbreak, both familial and relational.
Mhm.
And she lost her only son, which is my brother, and my dad at the very same time.
Oh, wow.
I've not seen my mother cry up to this
Mhm.
day.
She's
I
suppressing.
don't know how she cries, where she cries, but I know she must be deeply, deeply, deeply hurting.
Mhm.
And I suspect is that type of personality, that type of outlook on life I experienced when she was younger. And I think it had to do when I was younger. And I think it had to do with how she was raised.
Right. Because it's like then back then, like, women must be strong, and if you show emotion, it's weakness and all these
Emotions is a
different things.
bad thing. And
Right.
yep, even
Right.
today, emotions is a bad thing. I
Right.
wish
So
it
us
was different.
learning now that emotions are like showing emotion, it's like being vulnerable is a strength because it takes
Yes.
courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Us
Yeah.
learning differently. But I get
Mhm.
it where it's like, she probably tucked all those emotions down
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
is just trying to get by. And who
Mhm.
knows, maybe, when she's alone, maybe that's when she does her crying because,
I thought about that.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all do that, right? So I'm thinking maybe
Exactly.
that's her outlet. Maybe that's how she, releases all that negative emotion. And but my hope is that she releases it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is my hope for the persons who will pick up a book like mine. You pick up books like mine, self-help books, because you want to transition from the place you are to somewhere better.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is obviously coming to terms with your traumas and your emotions and being retrospective and or introspective and accepting where you are in your life and what happened to you, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, in the book, I shared very personal details of what I went through during a really difficult period of my life, coping with back-to-back deaths in my immediate family. My only brother, who I just spoke about, who I was extremely close to, died in a motorcycle accident.
Oh, wow.
And very shortly after, my father succumbed to the heartbreak of losing him. They
Oh,
were
wow.
very close. Yeah. So in the space of a few weeks, I lost two of the most important men in my life.
Wow. I'm
And
so
it's the
sorry.
same experience. Yes, thank you. It's the same experience my mother went through, right? I
Mhm.
can imagine it's even more traumatic for her.
Yeah.
And that took a toll on our family, as you can imagine.
Mhm.
Now, fast forward maybe a year and a little bit later, I started a relationship after the death. Now, I thought this was, the knight in shining armor, because God sent this person to me because there was this hole that needed to be filled, right?
Mhm.
But I was still grieving so deeply in some way. And I felt that the person I was with was somehow chosen for me. Not naive. This is the feeling I had. It was divine intervention. I needed this person, right? Um,
Mhm.
you know, and we again, we were amazing friends at first, and so you kind of got to know the person, and then you felt that, okay, here you are, this person is going to help you get back on your feet. You had a couple of good years, you thought you were doing good, and you started to feel better about your grief. I had support, or so it felt that way.
Mm.
And then,
Mhm.
I started to, shortly after, I started to experience some health issues. And I believe that a lot of that was compounded by stress. And sometimes we compartmentalize our grief and it manifests in different ways,
Yep.
right? Yeah, so I was busy with work, trying to handle my teenage son, who had started to be more than a handful. I know parents of teenage boys, they go through something sometimes, not all of us, but not all parents, but I went through a really hard time. Um, and I was still dealing with deep feelings again of grief from, trying my best, to just move on with my life. And so just at the point when I thought things were getting better, yes, I was stressed every now and again. Um, I was dealt this breakup out of
Mhm.
nowhere. I had a perfectly great day, went to see the Tina Turner musical, went to a really fabulous restaurant, came home, and I was handed this breakup on a platter, you know.
Wow.
Um, yeah, just out of nowhere. I mean, listen, people say, "Oh, you see the writings on the wall." Their relationships have challenges, right?
Mhm.
We all go through things, but not something that you think would lead to just abruptly, we need to talk. The
Mhm.
dreaded, what is that, 4 words, right?
Mhm.
Right. So I was handed this breakup by the person who I was dependent on for support in my greatest time of need. And I thought, and I thought this person would hold my hand as I walked through this period of grief and unexpected stress. So what happened next for me was despair, confusion, isolation, regret, insecurities, and all manner of negative emotions you can imagine. I found myself in a very desperate place. I've never been here before because, when you reach a certain age, I've had most breakups in the past, but I was younger. It was easier. It's like coil water. Your skin is thicker. You could just bounce back,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
When you reach a certain age and you feel that you found your ideal partner and now it's time for you to move on to the next phase of your life, when you're dealt this kind of a blow, it's excruciating, right? And
Yep.
so I found myself in a very desperate place, and I knew I needed to change my life. I knew who I was and what I was experiencing, they weren't aligned. This is not who I am. And luckily for me, even as a coach, I could not help myself necessarily. And so as a transition and self-development coach, I had to I had access basically to information or knowledge or resources is what I call them, and tools that I knew I could use to help me get out of the rut I was in. So I was my own student, but I needed it, right, but it needed to be tailored to suit what I was going through. And that's when I literally created on pen and paper, a healing plan for myself. I call myself my own pioneer. Yeah. And it was during that process that I discovered so much about my own strength. And I documented how I was able to accept all of what was happening to me, gracefully, but ultimately how this one thing that I found out about myself, how this one thing was able to carry me through. And that's how I started journaling. And that journal turned into this book I'm talking about today.
Wow.
But I went through a really dark time. I've never, again, it was within a 4 year period of losing the two most important men in my life, to losing the person who you thought was there for you to get you back on your feet. So it was a really, 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 really bad time. And I
Wow.
had to find a way to get back on my feet by creating a healing plan for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what was your aha moment that started your healing journey? Because I know we all have one, especially when we, start to go really deep and doing all of the work. But I hear it.
Yeah. Well, one significant aspect, I think, of my healing journey that I think is important to share to the world is the transformative power of self reflection and acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the time we don't move on from one level to the other because we don't accept where we are or what happened to us.
Right.
We're in denial a lot about our
Mm-hmm.
life. And it's as easy as just stepping back, taking off those rose colored glasses, or that what I call quote unquote denial glasses, and really just peeling back the layers and say, hey, let me just sit here for a second and assess my life and see what really is happening. And, after enduring this heartbreak that I speak of, I embarked on this journey of, again, this deep introspection. I spent days just really going back and writing down what was happening, why I think it happened, things about me that I never wrote down before, things that I learned about myself. And I learned that acknowledging and embracing both the highs and the lows of my experience was, what's the word? I think crucial or critical to my healing process. And
Mm-hmm.
so by accepting the reality of my emotions and my experiences, it didn't have anything to do with this relationship, even if it goes way back. I laid the foundation for true healing to take place, right? But the first thing I had to do was to snap out of my funk
Mm-hmm.
and accept what was happening to me. But I know acceptance, there's this journey of there's steps of grief, and I know acceptance falls somewhere at the end. I find that, I did my own thing. And that's why this book was created, because I found a different way. I found that if I were able to muster the strength, to this courage, to just sit down and really just understand and accept where I'm able to put the past in the past, and work on my healing, work towards the future. And my future is healing. And what that looks like, it's something that I have to create myself. Because no matter how much therapy you go to, no matter how many things, you buy and whatever you do and it doesn't matter how many people you talk to, if you have not accepted where you are or what happened to you, you will never move on from where you are. You will remain stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But I know that the traditional way of healing is to go through these different steps and, getting over heartbreak or dealing with grief. But I find that it didn't quite work that way for me. I find that we have to first try, find ways to accept where we are, then to move on. But another thing I discovered, you talk about aha moment. One of the things that I learned is that we have this thing, it's called the inner strength, and the book is based about that. It really is this innate characteristic, this trait that we have, all of us have inside of us, but a lot of us don't know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we accept and understand and acknowledge that the thing is there to help us get over every and anything, we will feel better about moving forward with our lives after being stuck in a rut, after heartbreak, after any type of despair. If we can somehow utilize this inner strength that we were innately born with, we are golden. We're good to go. We will never look at despair and heartbreak and challenges and hardships the same way again. We all have it. Do we know how to utilize it? Maybe not. And that's what the straw coaching method is about. It's this framework that I developed through the healing process, right? To help us identify and leverage our personal strength during challenging times. We underestimate our own resilience. We underestimate it because all we want to do is just to curl up under the sheet, eat ice cream all day, stay home and watch
Our trauma response.
Right. And we tend to forget that we have this thing inside of us that can, prevent us from doing all of that. But we first have to identify that. And so my journey taught me that recognizing these strengths, no matter how small, is somewhat of what I want to say, a powerful catalyst maybe for overcoming adversity. And so I encourage people to, you have to go through your pain. Good things come on the other side of pain. As Winston Churchill says, if you're going through hell, keep going. But you cannot stay there the entire time. And what we do as coaches is to help people get through that, get from a place of being stuck to finding and sort of embracing and owning their power to get through the other side.
Absolutely. There's two things that you said that I wanted to highlight and go back to, because you talked about the stages of grief. So for the listeners who are listening, it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And people have this assumption that grief happens in that order. But not only has it been proven that it's not that way, but I have experienced that is definitely not that way. And you jump all over the place and back and forth, as part of the process. It's not in that order, and each stage can take, longer, for different people. We heal at different paces. We all, move at a different pace, but also you spoke to, healing ourselves. And I think, if we think about as kids or even as adults, if you get a cut or you fall and you scrape your knee or, anything like that, the doctor doesn't heal that cut. The Band-Aid that you put on it doesn't heal that cut.
Right.
You're healing yourself from the inside out, right? We heal ourselves. So with everything that we experience, even though we have all of these beautiful tools, books, podcasts, therapists, it is still up to us to do the work and to do the healing. It's all up to us. And I think sometimes, because if we don't have if we don't have a healthy perspective on healing, then someone can read all the books and go to all of the seminars and do all the things and still not move forward because they're not doing the work. They are not applying the healing. They're not healing from the inside out. Yeah.
And you know what I found too, during my training, as a life coach, as a transition coach, and in writing this book, and just from my personal experience, is that, and again, So we're going to talk about this whole grief thing for a while because, again, you deal with grief when you lose a relationship, when you're betrayed, and when you lose a loved one, right? And those are all excruciating circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I said it was really, really important for people to understand that you don't have to follow this traditional, or grief doesn't have to be processed in that traditional way, because I found that I went to acceptance first. Now, here is the reason why it's unique, it's different for everybody, or why we can think outside the box when it comes down to our own healing experience. Everybody's experience is unique.
Yes.
That's number one. Each person's experience of grief is unique or loss, let's say. So it's influenced by their personality, their coping mechanism, your personality, and how you cope with things. We talk about these traumas, your past experiences, your attachment style. All of that has to do with how you deal with grief, your support system. It also has to do with the nature of the loss. So what works for one individual may not work for another. Okay. And individuals, we all experience different intensities. I know people who divorced their husbands or partners for 20 years and they just went to another marriage in a year. And I know someone who I'm extremely close with, an amazing person. She is still stuck in that breakup 10 years. She's unable to move on. It brought her to that place where she's stuck for the past 9 or 10 years.
Wow.
And then there's someone else, who moved on and got married in a year. So it's not linear.
No, it's not at all. Like you said, there are so many different factors. And obviously, grief can be, loss of anything, loss of a job, loss of identity, loss of, what you thought your future was going to look like, loss of a person, all these different things. But I found when it came to people, losing people that have, I'm going to say in terms of people passing on, I'll use that. For me, grief has been an expression of love. The depth of my grief, like the closer that I was to the person, the deeper grief.
Of course. Yeah.
The harder that I love the person, the deeper the grief. So I've had scenarios where I've lost multiple people in 1 year, but it was like one person that grief was so deep and so hurtful. I'm still holding on to that. And not to say that I didn't love the other people, but it's like our connection wasn't as deep for that grief to be as long per se. But I would love to know, what are some things that you've been doing to find peace and joy in your life?
One of the things, so I had to go back to dealing with the whole heartbreak journey. One of the things I had to do was journal, right? And again, I find it to be my journal is like the friend who doesn't talk back.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, this journal is what, this book is a result of my journaling. And I practice mindfulness. It was the hardest thing because I am a creative. I have an overactive mind. It never shuts down. I have insomnia. It's sleepless. But I've managed to engage in mindfulness meditation and deep breathing exercises. And these practices help me become sort of more aware of my emotions. And again, that is through therapy. I learned all of that. I became open to that through therapy. One of the other things that I do is what we call CBT, and a lot of people is familiar with it, cognitive behavioral therapy. And, these sort of help you to challenge negative thoughts through patterns, right? And developing sort of healthier coping strategies. So I do CBT. I've done CBT, and I'm now being introduced to what they call DBT, which I believe is called dialectical behavioral therapy. And this is where you sort of explore your thoughts and beliefs about the trauma that you've experienced. Because what I realized is that over the last 4 years from this back-to-back heartbreak that I developed somewhat of a PTSD. And so a lot of people don't understand that you can suffer breakup trauma. Like it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Heartbreak, it's a real thing. And it's not just, oh, he broke up with me or she broke up with me. So, I'm feeling bad. I'll get over it. No, you actually can be extremely traumatized from some of those experiences. And I believe that I suffered, I experienced that because of the shock and, the nature, I guess, of the breakup. One very, very important thing is we have to be compassionate. And I apparently all these years was taking care of all these other people, making sure everybody was great. I was the best lover, the best caretaker, the best daughter, the best mom, or whatever. But I probably wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't kind to myself. And I started to practice self-compassion by treating myself with kindness and understanding. I come first now. Me first now. It's not selfish.
Yeah.
It's loving.
Absolutely.
And I find that that makes a difference in my life and how I navigate the nuances, the challenges of the everyday life now is to be compassionate to myself. And,
I love that.
yes, to be, you have to be compassionate. And all of this is part of this whole self-reflection thing I talked about. It's an ongoing process. And I find that it's okay to pace yourself. It's important to just pace yourself. You're in charge of you. Go at your own pace. Healing from trauma, especially heartbreak, takes time. It takes patience. It takes kindness. That same compassion, self-compassion I talk about. So you have to be kind to yourself as you navigate through your journey of acceptance and healing. And those are some of the things that I've done and I continue to do to get to or through to the other stage of life.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love every time I hear a guest talk about therapy, because I go to therapy every week. I am pro therapy.
Me too.
And I love all the other tools that you have recommended and that you use. One thing I wanted to add, because you talked about, being traumatized and experiencing the PTSD. And I too, because of a breakup, had experienced PTSD through narcissistic abuse. But there was a book that my therapist had recommended. It's called Traumatized. It's called Traumatized: Identify, Understand, and Cope with PTSD and Emotional Stress.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's from another therapist. Her name's Katie Morton. And she shares a lot of stuff on social, but, including your book, my books, this book, I obviously, we can read so many books, but I definitely recommend all of them in terms of utilizing the tools to get through life's struggles. We don't realize, like I said before, a lot of things that we've experienced that may be traumatizing. Even in this book, she talks about, our shared trauma through social media and the things that we see on a regular basis. Just understanding that there are so many tools out there to help us to heal. And you and I are both coaches, so they can definitely reach out to us as well. So I would love if you can share with the listeners where they can stay connected with you and learn more from you and about you.
Sure. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce my work and my experience to your audience. We have a new Instagram page. It's called The Strength of Your Straw. That's also the name of my book, The Strength of Your Straw: The Secret to Overcoming Heartbreak and Hardship. You can find that on Amazon.com or on our website, strengthofyourstraw.com. But also just, connect with us on social media, The Strength of Your Straw. It's our new Instagram page. And so I look forward to connecting with people.
Awesome. I will definitely have the links to your website, your social in the detailed section of the episode so they can just click and connect with you directly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. What a great experience. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you, Heather. I truly, truly do appreciate you. And I appreciate your transparency and you sharing your journey with us. And I always feel honored when a guest shares something they've never shared publicly before. And you've shared two things during this episode.
I don't know how I'm going to live with myself after this. Oh my goodness.
We appreciate you more than you know.
Thank you so much.
To all you healers out there, until next time, subscribe on all platforms and don't forget to rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcast. And I just want to thank each and every one of you that continues to listen each week to help the show rank globally in the top 1.5% of most popular podcasts out there. And there are over 3 million podcasts out there. I just want to challenge you to share this episode with 2 people that would receive value from hearing Heather's story. 2 people who are on their healing journey, that are processing their grief or probably trying to overcome heartbreak. Feel free to screenshot this week's episode and share your aha moments, share your takeaways and your gems. You can tag Heather at The Strength of Your Straw. You can tag myself at The Real Makini Smith. A healthy community is a healing community, and a healing community is full of hope because it has seen its own people weather, survive, and thrive. So let's continue to heal her.